Now that you're familiar with the most common tannage types, let's take a look at the primary categories of leather. Full grain. Now, full grain leather refers to leather that has not been sanded or buffed to remove imperfections on the hide's surface. You might remember this sketch from Module 1. It shows a cross-section of the skin. Now, this is the portion of the skin included in the top grain leather. It contains the entire grain, hence the name full grain. Now, we'll talk more about imperfections in Module 4, but if you look at a hide and you don't see any imperfections like scars, brands, growth marks, then it's probably not full grain leather. Why? Well, because no animal is perfect. It would be like looking at a human skin and not seeing a single freckle, not one bruise, stretch mark, or scar. I mean, that just doesn't happen. We all have imperfections, and so do animals. Now, full grain leather is considered the gold standard, the highest grade of leather, and it's usually the most expensive. Here are a few characteristics of full grain leather to consider when determining if it's a good fit for your project. Full grain leather typically gets better with time. The grain has breathability and wears over time, developing a patina that's unique and provides character that many people desire in their leather goods. It's also strong and durable. Because it contains the entire grain where the tightest fiber structure resides, full grain leather is very strong and durable. It can also be difficult to work with. Now, although it's durable, that tight fiber structure can make it difficult to work with for certain applications. Top grain leather. The second highest grade of leather is called top grain. Now, while top grain leather still has some of the natural grain included on the top, tightest fibers of the hide have been removed. When the very top of the grain is sanded or buffed to remove imperfections, what's left is called top grain leather. Removing the very top portion of the grain removes the tightest portion of fibers, which leaves top grain leather not quite as strong as full grain leather. However, it does make top grain more pliable and in some cases easier to work with when compared to full grain leather. While sanding down the top of the grain gives it less breathability, top grain leather is usually more water and stain resistant when compared to full grain leather. The next category of leather is called a split. After the full or top grain is removed, what's left is referred to as a split. Now, if the hide is very thick, this area can be separated multiple times, leaving several splits. It is common for one side of the split to be finished in some manner, often by embossing a faux grain or a pattern on the split. Anytime leather has an artificial grain or pattern applied to the surface, it's referred to as corrected grain. Now, this is another term you may come across, and here's an example of a split with corrected grain. Splits are also the part of the hide where suede is often created. Suede is left soft, almost fuzzy-like on both sides. It can be appropriate for some applications, but it stains very easily and is difficult to clean. In fact, most leather cleaners and conditioners can't be used on suede. Because splits and suede come from the hide with a looser fiber structure, they're not as strong as the top or full grain leather. Since they're considered a mid-grade leather, splits are often more affordable than top grain or full grain leathers. Now, there's a wide variety and range of quality within this category. I've worked with some splits that I consider to be very nice leather, and I've worked with other splits that I would never touch again. So, if you're considering purchasing a split, just be aware of the variety that's out there within that category of leather. Bonded leather. And finally, bonded bonded leather, sometimes called reconstituted leather. After we remove the full and the top grain and the split, what remains is leather dust and leftover parts. Now you might think that would get thrown away. Not always. Bonded leather is created by taking the leftover leather bits from the tannery and gluing them or pressing them onto a fiber sheet. Think chicken nuggets. They take the leftover chicken parts, smash them together, and make a chicken nugget. Is it really chicken? Technically yes, but much like chicken nuggets, bonded leather is a low quality product. It is relatively inexpensive compared to the other categories of leather, and it's often used for mass-produced leather furniture, Bible covers, purses, things like that. Sometimes, even the surface is painted or embossed to create an artificial pattern. Now this here is an example of bonded leather. This piece was also embossed to create a pattern that mimics an animal skin. Now this piece would also be considered a corrected grain. It's not real grain. It's been painted to some fashion to create this faux finish. Now because of the polyurethane or glue that's used to hold the bits of fiber to the leather backing, bonded leather often smells different than fuller top grain leather. It just doesn't have that yummy leather smell. Now personally, I'm not a fan of bonded leather and I don't use it. However, I've included it here because it is an option and you need to understand what it actually is in order to determine if it fits your needs. And there you have it, the primary categories of leather: full grain, top grain, splits, and bonded leather. Now, when shopping for leather, especially at first, it may be difficult to determine which category the leather falls into. So do not be afraid to ask the leather supplier. They should be able to provide this information to you. Like most things, with leather, you get what you pay for. While there are exceptions to this rule, in general, higher quality leather will cost you more. That shouldn't be a surprise. Now, there have been times where I've shelled out a ton of cash and still got crappy leather. And there have been a few times when I've gotten a fabulous deal on very high quality leather. However, that's not the norm. So if high quality leather is important to you, be prepared to pay a little more. Now, that being said, if you're new to leatherwork, I don't recommend running out and just buying the most expensive piece of leather that you can find. That's not always the best idea. Remember, there is not one leather that's perfect for everyone, and you should always base your leather buying strategy on what best fits the needs of your project. So if you're just starting out, sometimes it makes more sense to purchase a mid-grade leather to play around with, something to practice on. Regardless of how passionate and excited you are to create, there is a learning curve with leatherwork, and you will make mistakes along the way. Trust me. If you bought the most expensive leather you could find right off the bat, you're more likely to beat yourself up if your first project doesn't come out exactly as planned. However, if you start with a middle-of-the-road leather and make a few mistakes, it's not as costly to your pocketbook. When I first started out, I bought low-quality leather, mostly because it was cheaper and I really didn't understand the difference. Remember when I told you that I had to figure all this stuff out on my own? Yeah, I wasn't kidding. Still, looking back, I actually am pretty glad that I started out with a mid-grade leather for two reasons. First, it was a cost-effective way to practice. Like I said, make mistakes, learn, and improve. If I would have bought the most expensive, high-quality leather for my first few projects, I could have become frustrated because they turned out to be a hot mess, and I may have even given up. But because I didn't spend a ton of money on the leather, it wasn't a huge loss. Now, as I continued to learn and my confidence grew, I worked my way up to using higher quality, more costly leather. Which brings me to number 2. It helped me appreciate higher quality leather. By not starting with the best, I am now able to truly appreciate higher quality leather. And because I've worked with all types of hides, I'm quickly able to determine if the leather meets my personal standards. Now keep in mind, there's a difference between buying lower quality leather by choice and buying it by accident. I started buying it by accident because I was ignorant, totally clueless. You, on the other hand, will be armed with the knowledge to make strategic buying decisions. So, by the end of this boot camp, whatever leather you select, it will be because it fits your needs and your current goals. Which brings us to your next leatherwork assignment. Complete number 2 on your cheat sheet. Based on the information you've learned in this lesson, what category of leather best fits the needs of your project? Remember, your needs may change over time and also change for various projects, but think of something you'd like to make now and keep that in mind as you complete your leatherwork assignment. That's it for today. Have a good one.